On in the show, when it comes down to it, there are few things that I love in life more than football. I love wrestling. I love my marital family, if you can say that much. Way more than my blood family, of course. And when it comes down to it, few things really, I guess, come close to that. And when it comes down to it, football is one of the things that I love most. It takes my mind off of a lot of mainstream things, no matter how many times mainstream things bleed into football. But at the end of the day, football is a way for me to see a bunch of big burly dudes run into each other in a very inhumane way. That lead to a lot of injuries, but because of passion, and those injuries don't really affect those players emotionally for the rest of their lives, unless of course the injury is bad, because of the fact that they know they got injured doing something that they love and that they were passionate about. And few things blend passion and pain and anger and all wrap it into something beautiful like football. And when the NFL is not on, there's very little football for people to enjoy the way that they enjoy the NFL. It has to kind of be a distinct alternative to the NFL in order for people to really separate it and look forward to it in a different way than the NFL. And with football, it comes down to a way of you can enjoy something else like the NFL, but if it's a CFL, it's like, okay, you enjoy the CFL for what it is, but you kind of wait for the NFL to start. It's not different enough for you to really separate the two and appreciate them both and look forward to them both on different levels. With me, that is done properly with the LFL. The LFL is completely different from the NFL. I love the idea of women having their own football league and own professional way, even if it's unstable in a way. I love the fact that it's just different enough to give me a reason to look forward to it almost as much as I look forward to the NFL. And when it comes down to it, the LFL season for 2018, their LFL regular season for 2018 just wrapped up. And when it comes down to it, you got 4 playoff teams. In the East, you've got the number 1 seeded Nashville Knights with a 4-0 record on the season, playing against the number 2 seeded Chicago Bliss, sitting at 3-1 on the regular season. And in the Western Conference, you have the number 1 seeded Austin Acoustic at the 2-2 record, and the number 2 seeded LA Los Angeles Temptation at a 1-3 record. I'm now going to quickly predict the Eastern and Western Conference playoffs and the Legends Cup 2018, which I believe is being held in Austin, Texas, if I'm not mistaken. And I will be predicting those with a short reason as to why. So for starters, we have the Bliss and we have the Knights. The Knights led by former Seattle Mist quarterback and veteran quarterback in the LFL, KK Matheny, and the Chicago Bliss being led by emerging quarterback, I believe Jane Caldwell, if I'm getting the name correct. When it comes down to it, this is being recorded before Saturday because I follow a couple of the LFL athletes, and I know sometimes they will post a result of the game, which will be live streamed a week afterwards. And I try to avoid that as much as possible. And when I make my predictions, I would like to do it before any spoilers can be made. So this is the Friday before the conference championship games. We will be live streaming this whole thing in a live stream form, and then it'll obviously be post uploaded to YouTube. So when it comes down to it, we'll start with the Western Conference because I believe that's the lesser of the two look forward to conference matchups, just because the difference in terms of team stability and weight length. When it comes down to it, the Acoustic walk into the game probably better off than the Temptation. The Temptation are riding off of a huge boost of momentum with their win against Denver a couple of weeks ago. And the Acoustic are coming off of a pretty damn good season in 2018. They walk into they walk into a game in which they have a real chance of making it into the LFL Legends Cup game for the first time in franchise history. Ashley Salerno, as I recently learned, is coming back to the Temptation to start at quarterback for them tomorrow against the Acoustic. I'm looking forward to it, primarily because I like the idea of the Temptation having a fighting chance against the Acoustic with a quarterback that can play the game. I don't know if it'll be enough, though. When it comes down to it, I think Ashley Salerno has been away for a long time. When it comes down to it, I think at the end of the day, the fact that Ashley Salerno has been away for so long, and the fact that there has been enough time left for her to kind of be away from the gridiron compared to Tisha Winfrey, who's been playing consistently and has been playing pretty damn good football. I think the Acoustics have a distinct advantage in terms of quarterback ability. I don't know how much the rust factor will add into it. Ashley Salerno, I believe, is a much better leader than Tisha Winfrey. So I think it could be very even when it comes down to that, but I think the decision-making the Acoustic have the advantage in. And when it comes down to it, I think the Acoustic have a small to mild to large advantage in almost all categories other than defense. I think the defensive side goes to the Temptation, which I don't know how much it'll help the Temptation, but when it comes down to it, I think the Acoustic just have the edge over the Temptation. I look at Austin. They are a young and hungry team, and they are dying to make history for the franchise. Tisha Winfrey, may not be the veteran leader. She's a good quarterback. I don't think she's great. I don't think she's elite. But she's a good quarterback to have you lead or be led by through the playoffs. And with Salerno's rust factor, with a mediocre LA offense and their defense being the only thing that can really keep them in the game long term, with the fact that Austin is very high sped and is very high octane, can burn through you, no matter how good your defense is. I think the defensive role with LA, unless they come out lights out throughout the game, I think this is Austin's game to lose. I think LA has a lot to work up against, and I think it may just be too much of an uphill battle to get their 1950s car all the way to the top. So I'm going to go with the Acoustic beating the Temptation this Saturday or tomorrow or whatever. I think it'll be a closer game than many would think, but also a larger deficit than many would think or give an assumption. I would think it's about a 10 to 15 point difference in terms of the final score. So I'm going to go with the Austin Acoustic to beat the LA Temptation, move on to the LFL Legends Cup, and they will play the winner of the Eastern Conference matchup, which is a 3-1 Chicago Bliss playing the designated home team, Nashville Knights, who have a 4-0 perfect record. I struggle to really see a predictable outcome. Chicago has played against damn good teams this year, and Nashville's kind of had that little boost. They started the season against the Seattle Mist that were heavily banged up from losing most of the starters to Nashville within this last off season. So they were trying to get the gel rolling, and Michelle Angel was damn good in detrimental in getting them to that position. But they went from that to, I believe, Omaha. They played Denver, and they played Omaha. And when it comes down to it, I believe they closed out the season against, or I believe they played Atlanta at one point, and they beat Atlanta. And I think Atlanta was the only true competition they had. Seattle was competition, but at that time in the season, they weren't gelled enough to be able to be a formidable threat to Nashville, despite hanging in there long enough to have a solid chance at winning within the final 4 minutes. I don't think Nashville's really had a big competitor like Chicago. KK Matheny is a damn great natural-born leader. She is somebody that can take, no matter what offense it may be, somebody that could take an offense to the places that the offense needs to be taken. I would be the one to trust her in the play calling department. When it comes down to it, I don't know exactly how much of an effect a less heavy schedule will have overall on Nashville playing against an actual competitor in Chicago. And Chicago's been fantastic this season. They lost Christelle Ferrari Harris, and in to replace her was somebody that can do it just as good. Um, they made a bunch of moves in defense last year, and in came somebody who could do it better. And their defense has been fantastic, and their offense has been pretty damn formidable. And Jane Caldwell has been great. And this team has just persevered through a bunch. And they knocked off a competitive Omaha team, and they worked through a lot. Um, I'm struggling to really find a comfortable prediction. Over the past couple of days, I've really stuck to my guns on Nashville, but now looking back at Chicago and thinking about the possibility that is very real in terms of the fact that they could very well walk out of Nashville with or out of Chicago with a win. You know what? I'm gonna be a betting man. I do this a little bit when I feel like there's a different way of thinking, or if there's something that a lot of people are missing. I got it right when I talked about Johnny Mayfield, Johnny Manziel. I talked about it with Trent Richardson. I've made those predictions with a lot of guys, and when it comes down to it, I trust my gut when it is strong, and I'm going to go with Chicago. I think Chicago will eke it out in a very close game. I think up until the fourth quarter, it'll be pretty damn contested. And I think by the fourth quarter, Nashville will be flustered enough to the point where they realize that it's kind of do or die, and they're playing something that they haven't really been used to, within the past year. And I think that's when it will catch up. And I think Chicago being strong and consistent, I think it'll get the job done against Nashville in the closing minutes. And with that, I think Chicago beats Nashville in what will be ultimately looked at as a shocking defeat. Not a big shocking defeat, but a surprise. So with that, we move on to the Legends Cup, which will be played in Austin or Houston, I believe, maybe Houston. But it'll be played in Texas. And it'll be against the Eastern Conference champions, the Chicago Bliss, and the Western Conference champions, the Austin Acoustic. I can't see a way where the Acoustic beat the Bliss. I mean, Chicago's been consistent. They've been in the Legends Cup before. This is a new trip for Austin. Their lights out offensive scheme may be adjusted a little bit when it comes down to playing a team like Chicago in an environment like the Legends Cup where the title is on the line. I mean, you can get flustered in a big game like that. And, even in the playoffs, like Andy Reid always kind of plays a little bit more conservative with the Chiefs in the playoffs, and it never really ends well. And I don't think a lot of people have gotten that down because I don't think a lot of people have perfected this conservative scheme calling to the point where it wins them championships. And I am a strong believer that if something is working and something is going well, don't fix it. Don't try to adjust it. If it's working perfectly, let it work soundly and let it work perfectly. And it will help you and it will benefit you. And if it screws you along the way, then you look at how to perfect it. And once you perfect it, there's no reason to change it. And I think way too many teams fall into that little way of playing. New England, as much as I dislike them, I respect them for what they've been able to do. Their scheme has always been take your time in the early stages of the game to feel out your opponent, and then once you've felt them out, and once you've gotten them under your control, and then you've kind of seen their ways and their little rungs, then you strike. And the only times that it hasn't worked were a couple of years back against the Eagles, and a couple of years before that with the Browns, where they constantly kind of changed up their flow of the game a bit to the point where the Patriots were caught off guard because they weren't really used to catching an opponent and then having them flip on them once they really got them under the toes. So that was when it kind of broke down. And the Patriots have really been able to perfect that to the point where it's a rare occasion where they lose surprisingly like that. And I don't think coaches really see that consistency is what helps you move on. You can't keep momentum going when you change up what got you the momentum in the first place. And I think that's going to be the case with Austin. I think with Austin, they see Chicago as a formidable opponent, kind of like a giant they have to slay. And because of that, they're going to kind of adjust what has won them games beforehand to kind of cope with the idea of facing a giant and facing Goliath rather than facing somebody of your own stature. And facing people or facing teams that were like the Western Conference this year. And I think that'll ultimately be a downfall for Austin. I think it's inevitable for Austin to try to figure out something new to get around a team like Chicago that they haven't really played before. At least in this year, I think it'll be something that they'll try differently in order to give them an edge over a team like Chicago that they haven't been used to this season. I think it's an inevitability, and I think it's what's going to end up causing them to lose. I know that there's a multitude of different ways that the acoustic could lose, but when it comes down to it, I think that the most likely reason for it is going to be a dramatic shift in play calling and in the way they go about the game that I think is an inevitability for a team like Austin against a team like Chicago. So I'm going to go with Chicago. I think it'll be a closer game than you would give it credit for. Maybe a 20 to 22 point game by the time the final score rings through. But when it comes down to it, ultimately, I predict the acoustic over the Temptation, the Bliss over the Knights, and the Bliss to beat the acoustic in the Legends Cup to give Chicago another Legends Cup victory. And so, yeah, that's that. But all in all, I'm really looking forward to the playoffs, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how next season stacks up. And I can't tell you how much I'm ready for this. So, yeah, good luck to everybody on the gridiron, and I look forward to seeing the outcome of the playoffs, and I look forward to seeing what the offseason holds true going into the 2019 season. So, yeah, let's move on. The Hardy Complex, episode 3. We'll be back in 60.